Welcome back to our English class, and I am your English teacher Shanti Priya. I look happy. Am I really happy? People may look happy on outside, but from inside they may be sad. We are going to listen such a story of a happy prince. Why did people call him a happy prince? Was he really happy? Let's find out. Before that, let us have a look at the overview of the lesson. I am going to deal with this chapter in 4 parts. The first one would be the summary of the story. The second one is think about it. The third one is talk about it. And at last, you will find the suggested reading activity. Before that, let's look at the learning objectives of this lesson. By the end of the lesson, you will be able to explain the story of the happy prince in your own words. Express your emotions and thoughts about the story of the happy prince. Describe the characters in the story of the happy prince. State the moral lesson that can be learned from the story of the happy prince. Recognize the different ways the happy prince helped the people who were in need in the story. Summarize the events that led to the downfall of the happy prince statue. Compare and contrast the happy prince and the swallow bird as characters in the story. My dear students, I have an important note for you. The lesson is basically taught for the understanding of the story. The supplementary reader is particularly prescribed to enhance your reading skill. Read the lesson, try to understand it, and answer the questions given at the end of the lesson. Before going into the summary of the lesson, let's have a look about the author of the story, Oscar Wilde. Our author, Oscar Wilde, is one of the most popular and controversial literary figures of the 19th century. Oscar Wilde was a celebrated playwright, poet, novelist who was famous for his satire and sharp wit. He was an unconventional figure of his day, well known for his colorful and flamboyant style both in prose and in dress. Our story, The Happy Prince, was published in 1888 in the book The Happy Prince and Other Tales. It was a collection of fairy tales for children. However, The Happy Prince can be considered as an allegory, which is a story that has a moral and political meaning. Now let's move on to the important characters of the story. The foremost important character of the story, The Happy Prince, is the Happy Prince himself. This is a story of a statue of the Happy Prince. Here, our Happy Prince is in the form of a statue. When he was alive, he was very happy because he lived in a palace where sorrow had no place. He had not seen any sorrow in his life. So he was always smiling and he was very joyous. So people used to call him a Happy Prince. After he was dead, his statue was put up so high that he was now able to see the ugliness, the misery, the sorrow of the people in his city. Now he was very sad and he used to wail over his pain. Next comes the character of the swallow bird. He was a kind soul who empathized with the pain of the happy prince. He helped the prince in the kind act of helping people who suffered. Students, get ready with your supplementary readers. From next slide, I would be giving you a model reading of the lesson. See you there. Friends, be ready with the lesson 5, The Happy Prince, from your supplementary reader textbook. Let's start reading. Read after me, okay? High above the city, on a tall column, stood the statue of the Happy Prince. He was gilded all over with thin leaves of fine gold. For eyes, he had two bright sapphires, and a large red ruby glowed on his sword hilt. One night there flew over the city a little swallow. His friends had gone away to Egypt 6 weeks before, but he had stayed behind. Then he decided to go to Egypt too. Students, this is how you read a lesson. Okay, now let's jump into the summary of the story. Our story starts with the happy prince. Once in a town, there lived a prince. He was called Happy Prince by the people because he was always happy. And why was he happy? He did not see any sorrow or misery of the people. Sorrow and misery was not allowed in the palace. So he was always happy. That's why he was called the Happy Prince. Eventually, after his death, his statue was erected on a tall pedestal in the middle of the town. You see, on the very big pedestal, his very large size statue was erected in the middle of the town. How was the statue of the Happy Prince? Let's see. The statue was covered with gold. That means a thin foil of gold was placed all over the statue, and he had two precious sapphires, the blue stones, in the place of his eyes. This prince was holding a sword, and in the handle, that means the hilt of the sword, there was a red ruby fitted. Now the happy prince was able to have a complete look over the city. From there, he could see that his people were in a lot of poverty and misery. Our happy prince was a very kind hearted person. When he saw the misery and poverty of his people, he felt very bad. But he could not do anything because he was in the form of a statue. That's why he used to feel the pain and weep over the problems of his people. A swallow bird was flying to Egypt to catch up with his friends. It was night and he reached the city of the happy prince. He looked for a place where he could take shelter at night times. Now he thought the statue of happy prince was an appropriate place. He alighted at the feet of the happy prince to take rest for the night. The swallow bird was preparing to go to sleep while a large drop of water fell on him. It was surprised that there were no clouds in the sky. Eventually, he discovered that the statue of the prince was weeping. He went to the statue and inquired about his problem. Then the happy prince told his story and requested the swallow bird to become his messenger in helping his people. The swallow bird refused the prince's requests to stay back and help him because he had to travel to Egypt to catch up with his friends. Somehow the prince convinced the swallow bird and it stayed back to help the prince. The first request of the prince was to remove the ruby from the hilt of the sword and deliver it to the poor seamstress. This seamstress had a son who was very sick and was crying for some oranges, and she had no money. The prince wanted to give her some money in the form of the ruby stone. As per the request, the swallow bird delivered the ruby to the seamstress. The next morning it came in to the happy prince and told, "Okay, prince, I have helped you. Now I have to go back to my friends." But the prince was not willing to send the swallow, and he wanted the swallow to do another help for him by staying one day more with him. One day, the happy prince requested the swallow bird to remove a sapphire from one of his eyes and deliver it to a young playwright. This young playwright was feeling very hungry and cold, and he did not have enough money to buy food or firewood. He was unable to finish a play for the director of the theater. Now this bird took one of the sapphires from the eyes of the prince and delivered it to the young playwright. The prince requested the bird to stay for another day. He also told to remove one of the sapphires from the other eye and deliver it to a poor match girl who was unable to earn any money because all her matches had fallen into a gutter. The happy prince had turned blind. The swallow bird did not want to leave him and fly back to Egypt. He had developed a sort of attachment with the happy prince. It was turning winter and it was becoming cold. Still, the swallow bird stayed back with the prince. Prince requested the swallow bird to go around his city and tell the stories of his people. The swallow bird flew over the great city and saw that the rich were making merry in their beautiful houses while the poor were sitting at the gates and begging money. So he told all these stories to the prince about the miseries the people were experiencing in his city. Now the happy prince wanted to help all those poor people, but he had no precious stones left. He had already given to the seamstress, to the match girl, and the playwright. So he requested the bird to remove the thin gold foil which was on his statue and give it to the poor and suffering people. Swallow bird started removing the leaves of the gold from the statue of the prince and gave it to the poor people. When all the gold has gone, the statue of the happy prince looked dull and grey. But it was for a good cause. The poor people of his country were more joyous as they were having good bread to eat. The winter approached and it was snow all over the city. The poor little swallow grew colder and colder, but it did not leave the prince. Eventually, it came to know that his death has approached. He went to the happy prince and asked him to kiss him and expressed his love for him. The swallow bird kissed the happy prince on the lips and fell down dead at his feet. At that moment, there came a curious, strange cracked sound from the statue. The heart of the happy prince, which was made with lead, has broken, which was unable to bear the death of the bird. Although the statue's heart was made of lead, it broke because it was overwhelmed with the affection and love towards the bird. After a few days, when the mayor of the city was walking in the city along with some counselors, they had a look at the statue of the happy prince. How was the statue? It was dull and grey, and these people did not wanted such a shabby statue to be in the city. Immediately, the statue was pulled down and it was placed in a furnace to be melted. Whole of the statue got melted, but the leaden heart, which was broken, did not melt. Then these people they removed this leaden heart and threw it in a garbage. When this leaden heart was thrown in the garbage, it went and fell beside the dead bird. Now an angel flew over the city as it was told to collect two precious things from the city. It landed over the city and collected the broken leaden heart and the dead bird and carried them to the paradise. God declared that both the bird and the prince shall live forever in God's city of gold, praising God. The swallow and the happy prince were the ones who had compassion for the people. They were charitable and helped them during their sufferings. This teaches us to be empathetic and generous towards those who are in a less fortunate situation than ourselves. Indeed, the swallow and the prince deserved the paradise. Let's see the analysis of The Happy Prince by Oscar Wilde. The Happy Prince is an ironic story about a prince who is more sad than happy. See, his name was Happy Prince, but he was sad. His childhood could be considered as a period of blissful ignorance because he was kept away from all the sorrow and misery around him. He was happy. When he became a statue after his death, he was able to see the misery of his people. Somehow he found out a way in the form of the swallow to help his people overcome their miseries. Only after he dies as a statue, the prince achieves happiness in the heaven along with the swallow bird. Let's look at the meanings of some of the words from our story. The first one is ruby. Ruby is a precious stone which looks dark red in color. It is often used in jewelry making to decorate jewelry. Okay. And when you come to the sapphire, it is also a precious stone like ruby only, but the sapphire is blue in color. Both the ruby and sapphires are used in the jewelry making. The next word is hilt. Hilt is the handle of a weapon or a tool, especially a sword or a dagger. See, if you see a sword, you will have a handle to hold it. That handle is called as a hilt. The next word is gild. Gild is where you cover something with thin foil of gold. That is called as gild. The procedure where you cover something with gold is called as gild. Is statue. Statue is nothing but a carved or a cast figure of a person or maybe an animal or something which is life size. Means you can see that that thing will be the size of the actual person or it can be more than that. It is called as a statue. Next word is monument. It is a statue or a building or any other structure which is erected to commemorate a notable person or an event. The next word is slumber, which means to sleep. The eighth word is thimble. Thimble means it's a small metallic cap-like thing which you put on the fingers to protect finger while sewing. So when you're sewing with a needle, sometimes the needle may hurt your fingers. So you put this metallic caps so that you can protect your fingers. That metallic cap is called as a thimble. Next word is wither. Wither is nothing but any living being like a bird or animal or anything which becomes dull and dry, that is called as wither. Next word is playwright. Playwright is a person who writes plays or dramas. Such person is called as a playwright. Now we come to the end of the summary of the story, The Happy Prince. Let's move on to the assessment section and check how much well you have understood the story. See you there. Let's look at the first question in our assessment section. Why was the prince called Happy Prince? A. Because he never cried. B. Because he was very lucky. C. Because he had everything. D. Because he always smiled and was living in a palace of happiness. Come on, children. Take some time. Think about the answer. Yes. The right answer is D. Because he always smiled and was living in the palace of happiness. Congratulations for getting the answer right. Let's move on to the next question. Second question. Why was the happy prince weeping? A. To see the condition of the little swallow. B. To see the sorrows and sufferings of the people of his tongue. C. To see his ugly body. D. None of these. Children, think about the answer. Yes, the answer is B. To see the sorrows and sufferings of the people of his tongue. Very good, children. Good going, good going. Let's move on to the third question. Question number 3. What does the happy prince ask the little swallow to take to the poor lady? A. An orange. B. A sapphire. C. A ruby. D. A bag of coins. Come on, children. Did you get the answer? The answer is C. A ruby. Good. Good for getting the correct answer. Come on. Let's move to the next question. Question number 4. What was the trouble to the playwright? A. He was sick. B. He was cold and hungry. C. He was dull and boring. D. He had no work to do. Come on, children. Try to answer the question. Yes, the correct answer is he was cold and hungry. B. Excellent, children. Let's move on to the next question. Question number 5. Where did the swallow die? A. In the city. B. Under the fountain. C. At the feet of the statue. D. In a house. Come on, children. Did you get the answer right? The right answer is C. At the feet of the statue. Very good, children. Let's move on to the next question. Why were the prince and the swallow considered precious by the angel? A. Because of their kindness and selflessness. B. Because of their services. C. Because they had many possessions. C. They were rich. Come on, children. Did you get the answer? The right answer is A. Because of their kindness and selflessness. Very good, children. With this, we come to the end of the assessment section. Now, let's move on to the section Think About It. In the section Think About It, some questions are given so that you can understand the story better. The first question is, why do the courtiers call the prince the happy prince? Is he really happy? What does he see all around him? Second question, why does the happy prince send a ruby for the seamstress? What does the swallow do in the seamstress's house? So recall the story and try to answer these questions. Third question, for whom does the prince send the sapphires and why? Question number 4, what does the swallow see when it flies over the city? Question number 5, why did the swallow not leave the prince and go to Egypt? Question number 6, what are the precious things mentioned in the story? Why are they precious? We come to the end of the section, think about it. Let's move to the next section, talk about it. Welcome to the section, talk about it. The little swallow says, "It is curious, but I feel quite warm now, although it is so cold." Have you ever had such a feeling? Share your experience with your friends. So, when the swallow bird helped the people, he felt a sort of warm feeling in his heart, though the temperature was very cold outside. So, when you do such good things, when you help out people, do you feel that warmth in your heart? Did you ever have such experience? If you have such experience, kindly share with your friends. Let's move on to the section suggested reading. Under the section suggested reading, some books are suggested so that you can get a better understanding about the writing style of the author or maybe the characters of the story. The first book is The Selfish Giant by Oscar Wilde. The book is How Much Land Does a Man Require by Leo Tolstoy. Leo Tolstoy is a master of realistic fiction and one of the world's greatest novelists who mostly writes about human experiences. Do read the story and talk about it with your friends. Let's see if we have achieved the objectives which were discussed in the beginning of the lesson. Now you will be able to explain the story of the Happy Prince in your own words. Express your emotions and thoughts about the story of the Happy Prince. Describe the characters in the story of the Happy Prince. State the moral lesson that can be learned from the story of the Happy Prince. Recognize the different ways the Happy Prince helped the people in need in the story. Summarize the events that led to the downfall of the Happy Prince's sculpture. Compare and contrast the Happy Prince and the Swallow Bird as characters in the story. With this, we come to the end of this class. Hope you have all understood the story and taken the lesson from the story of the Happy Prince of being compassionate, kind, and selfless and help the people in need and suffering. Thank you for attending my class. See you in the next class.